I'm reflecting back now. I really wonder sometimes what was I in the sense that you have this perception or this understanding of what you believe the Marine Corps is, right? You see Marines marching around, you see graduations, you see things like that on TV. I didn't know it was going to be as tough as it was, and I'm willing to. I mean, it was difficult. It was tough. It will for sure be one of the most difficult things I've ever done in my life. And it wasn't only just about boot camp. There's such a focus always around just boot camp, but all the things that drive precision and high expectations and discipline that are good for formation for the rest of your life.
Hello, this is Tab Bartley, and you are listening to the Oath We Took podcast, the show that tells the Marine Corps story through the Marines that served. I'm joined today by Leroy Garcia. He is the reason for this podcast. I know so many amazing Marines who hesitate to tell their stories. Their stories hold so much power and so many life lessons. Oftentimes, though, they go untold. Not every Marine story is the same. What is the same is the oath we all took. This week, I'm honored to have Leroy on the podcast. He served in the Marine Corps from 2000 to 2007. He deployed to Iraq as a mortary affairs specialist, and he served in a number of elected positions. And I'm excited to speak to him about the impact of his service on those roles and what he's now doing with the Department of Agriculture. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so excited to have you.
Good morning, Tab. I'm excited to be here.
So the first question, and I'm realizing is a question that I feel like everybody should ask, like service members or Marines, but like, why did you decide to join the Marine Corps?
Well, I always had in the recess of my mind as a young kid that I wanted to serve. I really believed that I would be unfulfilled if I didn't serve. The Marine Corps obviously offered the best uniforms. They were the most disciplined. They were the most contentious. I mean, it was all the things that I was really looking for right out of high school, and the opportunity to excel and be part of something bigger than myself. I say that as the oldest in my family of three brothers. Both my brothers both served in the Marine Corps as well. We all served in Iraq and Afghanistan, and so there's a proud family history of military service. And I figured if I was gonna serve, why not the Marine Corps?
Right? Oh, I love that. And where is your hometown? Like, where are you from? Is the Marine Corps or the military kind of like norm, or is it kind of outside of the people's norm to serve and in the Marine Corps?
It's a little bit of both. I'm from Pueblo, Colorado, which is about 2 hours south of Denver, home to a number of military installations. Obviously, the one of the most famous, the United States Air Force Academy. My oldest son, just recently, this last 2 months ago, graduated from the Air Force Academy, so we're super excited for him. But a large military community town, but a larger veteran population, home for a lot of military service. Pueblo, Colorado, my hometown itself, is home to 4 Congressional Medal of Honor recipients. So a long line of military service and pride in that community.
And so you joined right after high school, is that correct?
I did, yeah. I took about a semester out of college. I was in college a little bit. I joined actually the Marine Corps Reserves.
Okay.
I had decided that I wanted to serve. It was kind of conflicted. I definitely wanted to go to college. I also wanted to serve in the military, in the Marine Corps, and so decided to do kind of a hybrid, right? Why not join the United States Marine Corps Reserves? And we had a reserve unit in Aurora, Colorado, Buckley Air Force Base, then known as now is a different base, and ended up serving there, spending a number of years on active duty. Obviously, that was the drumbeat to 9/11, obviously the war in Iraq. And so I spent a fair amount of active duty time, even though I was in the reserves, but joined after about a semester of college. And primarily one of the driving factors for that was the opportunity to take advantage of the GI benefits that really, truly did help me throughout my professional career.
And so I was on the recruiting side of the house, so I always find it really interesting when people join the reserves, because where I was stationed for recruiting in South Carolina, people had no idea that the Marine Corps even had reserves. They thought the only way you could do reserves was Army. Like, they didn't know that any other branch did reserves. So how did you know that the Marine Corps had a reserve and kind of go down that path?
Well, I was super fortunate that I had a number of recruiters, and really they were a team. In Pueblo, Colorado, that office, Marine Corps office, actually functioned as a great team, and there were a number of Marines in that recruitment unit that were working to help advance poolies, those who were thinking about joining the Marine Corps. So a lot of obviously ASVAB testing practice, a lot of physical fitness preparation, general orders, things like that, but also a lot of career advice. Does the reserves look like a great option for you? And because I was already at a community college and wanted, obtaining a degree was really important to me, but also serving was too. I was just very fortunate that I had Marine recruiters who could line me up and tell me, because I didn't know that when I was looking to join the Marine Corps. I didn't even know there was such an option for Marine Corps Reserve. So in my mind, it was the best option.
And I think that's the thing with so many people. I did educators workshop, and there were so many educators when we do it every year that were like, I didn't know that you could do this path, or I didn't know like there were all these opportunities or these things. So I love hearing how people even like joined the Marine Corps and learned about the Marine Corps, because it's so unique. But there's always that, or seems to be that underlying of like wanting to serve, wanting to do more, wanting to, I'll say it because this is what the podcast is about, but like be the best, be the in the breast branch of service. And so when you joined, so your bio says you did mortary affairs. Was that your initial MOS that you signed up for?
It wasn't. I actually was part of a unit at Buckley Air Force Base in Aurora that was a reserve artillery unit. And I was actually a 3531, a motor T truck driver. That's what I did in the Marine Corps. That's what I was formally trained on. During the Iraq War buildup in March 2003, our unit was voluntarily reassigned, and a number of our Marines did mortuary affairs, and the other ones did force readiness and kind of protection. And I was just, I was selected out of that pool, about a quarter of us that needed to go off to mortuary affairs. So we kind of did a hybrid mortuary affairs school. They brought in Marines from Marietta, Georgia, and others who actually specialized in this field. They came to Colorado. They stood up a weekend, several day course, ran us through it, and shortly after that, we were deployed to California and then off to Iraq. So it was not a job that I went seeking to serve in the Marine Corps. As you know, many times in the Marine Corps, it's about service that's greater than yourself. And I will be the first to say that when I knew that we were taking on a new assignment, I wasn't particularly excited about that opportunity. You can imagine the just having an understanding before you even got into the field of what this entailed. I mean, picking up Marines' bodies, parts of their bodies, and protecting their personal artifacts so that they can ensure that those went back to their family members and they would have those archived. But just the challenge of that profession and that work. And so I wasn't particularly volunteering, but I was selected, and I took that job with a lot of pride. And obviously, I think it was formational for me later in life, to not only give me a different perspective about life and the value of it, and the importance of the work we do.
And I feel like it's a job in an MMOS that we don't talk about a lot, I think for a lot of different reasons. I was honored to have another guest who was in the same career field. She was a reservist as well. And talking about the struggles of personally being in that job and the mental and emotional toll. How did you kind of like get through that, and what were some of the things that you did? Because again, I mean, it's hard to sit here and know like the gravity of it, but you touched on it very slightly, but what were some of the things that you were able to do to do the job, and then post job, as you process what happened later?
I was always very fortunate that I had a family, a support network, friends, community, church, all of those things that are important when anyone deploys, anytime anyone serves and they're away from all the things that ground them. I was very fortunate that I had that. I was very fortunate that in my life, I was able to work through those challenges of serving. I won't always say it was a picnic, because it wasn't. But with that said, I was able to I believe make myself stronger.
So was that something that you expected kind of like at that age and that point in life to experience anything like that in the Marine Corps? And I asked that because I think for me, there was somewhat a reality of what the Marine Corps like would be or could be. But I think once you actually experience some of that, just kind of unexplainable, or at the moments where you just kind of have to get through it and then you process it later. Did you think the Marine Corps was going to be that way or have that impact?
I'm reflecting back now. I really wonder sometimes what was I, in the sense that you have this perception or this understanding of what you believe the Marine Corps is, right? You see Marines marching around, you see graduations, you see things like that on TV. I didn't know it was going to be as tough as it was, and I'm willing to. I mean, it was difficult. It was tough. It will for sure be one of the most difficult things I've ever done in my life. And it wasn't only just about boot camp. There's such a focus always around just boot camp, but all the things that drive precision and high expectations and discipline that are good for formation for the rest of your life. And so I really enjoyed it. I think when I look back and think about my deployments, I look back now and say and really reflect that I was fortunate to have the exposure as a Marine reservist. There were a number of Marine reservists who didn't deploy, who didn't serve in theater, who didn't have access. One of the I didn't know it then, but one of the benefits when I came back, I was on the USS Comstock, so our unit returned back, a number of us, and I got to participate and become a shellback. And so as I look at some of those things, I wouldn't have otherwise had that opportunity as a Marine reservist. Generally, many of them weren't experiencing that. And so I look at it as a great thing. It's definitely more than I thought I would get out of it. And that's why I'm so very proud of my military service.
The Oath We Took podcast, hosted by Marine Corps veteran Tab Bartley, tells the Marine Corps story through the Marines who served. While every story is unique, the common bond is the oath they all took. Tune in Mondays at 5 p.m. Eastern on Wreaths Across America Radio to catch these engaging conversations. Tab is also supporting the Military Women's Memorial through her Wreaths Across America sponsorship page. For every veteran's wreath you sponsor at wreathsacrossamerica.org/The Oath We Took, $5 will go directly to the Military Women's Memorial, the leading memorial and education center honoring the commitment, contributions, and experiences of servicewomen. Once again, to donate, go to wreathsacrossamerica.org/The Oath We Took.
And so as you're a reservist, that means you're also in your civilian career, advancing your civilian career and like what you're doing almost at the same time in a way.
That's right.
So can you talk a little bit about that? Because you're almost like you're balancing two careers and two different career paths that, yes, they align and they do things, but how is that? Because that's always been super interesting to me.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I was doing at that time is I was working on becoming a paramedic, a nationally registered paramedic. I was in school working on my associate's degree. I was fortunate. I was deployed halfway through my program to Iraq in 2003. So I came back after that deployment and finished up my associate's degree, and was really working aggressively in the medical arena, working in medical services. I was a supervisor at the Public County Jail over a medical division, and worked for American Medical Response as an emergency 911 paramedic. And so I have, up until this day, maintained my national credentials. It's something I don't practice as much anymore, but truly enjoyed that opportunity, and later had the opportunity to serve as a paramedic mentor. And so it got me actually into my education realm, where I tutored students and taught as a faculty member pre-hospital emergency medical services for over 15 plus years. And so it was a great opportunity. You're right. It's a challenge because many times you're focused on work, you're focused on family, you're focused on all the things that a civilian's really focused on at the same time that you have drill and you have AT, annual training, and you're like, so it does require you to have a lot of focus.
Because I'm just sitting here, I was active duty and I couldn't imagine focusing on like that career and another, like, it's just like mind boggling to me. Maybe it's because I'm like the tunnel vision type person. But I think it's really cool to see that you can have like, again, you have both careers that are, have this trajectory and are moving forward. And do you feel like that, like, I can only imagine how fast leadership skills developed and how well it made you in regards to, like, again, the civilian world is different than the Marine Corps, and you're getting those experiences at the same time. Do you feel like it really developed your leadership skill in a way that if you had just done one or the other, that maybe you wouldn't have developed that way, or maybe that fast?
Yeah, I absolutely do. I mean, there were things that you were learning in real time in the Marine Corps, being part of the unit, especially for someone like myself who was a corporal in the Marine Corps, small unit leadership, but applying that into the civilian world and the civilian sector really afforded me the opportunity. And as you know, when civilians know that you're a Marine, they really appreciate that. So there was a value often to going to AT, and some of my colleagues looking at me and saying, "Oh, you're going to be gone off work for 2 weeks." Yeah, I'm going to AT. We're going to be working on this military exercise, and so I think in a greater opportunity, it gives people a great understanding to what the military is about, how people are working in both of these roles as a civilian and a service member. And I would say that it was great for me.
And I talk about that a lot, people's perceptions, and, you hear it in the Marine Corps, perception is reality. And that's why I think it is so important for us to share our stories and our experiences, because I feel like people understand that a little more. They're more willing to listen or hear things when they hear somebody's actual story and experience. And so you're doing medical, you're doing the Marine Corps. How does that transition into getting into politics?
Well, I was at that time I was teaching at a community college, and there was an open seat available for the school board education role. And a number of my friends came to me and said, "Hey, you're finishing up your master's degree. You're at a community college. You're a faculty member. Why don't you think about running for the school board?" And several other friends were like, "I think you should look at city council." And so as I talked with others about where I thought I might be able to better serve and give and lend my talents, it turned out that serving on the Pueblo City Council was that opportunity. I served on Pueblo City Council for about 3 years. I loved it because issues weren't political, right? These are home issues. They're nonpartisan boards. So you're really focused on what are the meat and potato issues that are driving in a community, whether or not that's wastewater, or that's parks and recreation, or is it what is it of economic development for your community? There are things that are important to your community. So I really, really loved serving in that capacity. Was fortunate several years later that I got the opportunity to run for the Colorado State House of Representatives, serve in that capacity for 2 years, and then 2 years later run for the Colorado State Senate. I served in the Colorado State Senate for several years and absolutely enjoyed it. Was fortunate to serve as both the minority leader and ultimately finish as the first elected Latino Senate president. I served as Senate president for quite some time. I absolutely loved it. I loved it because I was unanimously elected by both Democrats and Republicans as the Senate president in both elections. That was a testament to me, and it reminded me what I used to know in the Marine Corps is you didn't look to the left to see if who you were serving was a Democrat. You didn't look to the right to see if who you were serving with was a Republican. You knew you were all in the fight together, and you had to embrace that and take care of each other. That's the way I've always approached my legislative political career. That's one of the things I loved most about serving the Colorado legislature is fighting on behalf of veterans and staying focused on initiatives that were important, whether or not that was rehab and working with our federal partners, or working on benefits that they could have, like accessing Colorado state parks when I was in Colorado, state parks for free, and things like that. So it was one of the pinnacles of my tenure.
And I think it's really interesting that, I feel like sometimes in politics, and those who are interested in politics, a lot of times, especially at these local levels, there's this, sometimes you have to start here, you have to start at this level, and you can't go here and you can't go here. But like you said, you assessed where you would be the best fit or where you could make the most impact. And for you, it was first to start at the city council instead of the school board, because that's where, where you felt like you had more of an impact and you showed. And I think that's something really important for those who are, I think, interested in making change happen. Again, I like to take like the word politics out of it. And like you said, and like the partisan out of it, because it's, where can you make the impact? What is the change that needs to happen, and how can you drive that? And then where do you need to go to do that? So I love that, like, that was the approach you took. And I think it shows that then look at this massive impact you were able to make, because that was your focus.
Yeah, and I would just add, you're right. Take that word out of this and just substitute the word leadership. I mean, Marines are always known for lead, follow, or get out of the way, right? And so I believed, and so did my community, obviously by virtue of several successful elections and never lost elections. I was very fortunate in that regard. But people are looking for real, genuine leaders. People need that. Our communities need that, and Marines are so disciplined and open-minded and tactical, pragmatic about things, that there a lot of the skills that you learn in not only boot camp, but the formation of your service, whether that be active duty or the reserve status, are very transferable for the civilian world. And I think it's one of the reasons why we know that civilian employers are always looking to hire veterans. There were so many skills and formation that they can translate into an organization's success. Why wouldn't you? And government's the same thing. So taking advantage of one of those service members to help contribute to make your team even better is a great success.
What were some of the hesitance you had to running for office? Because I'm sure that there were a lot of like, ooh, should I do this? Like, what were some of those hesitants that you had in regards to, following that career path? Again, that it didn't sound like that was ever a goal. It just kind of the opportunity arose.
Right. It wasn't one, not losing, right? That's an important one. But truly, Marines have this mindset where I'm not going to lose. I'm going to stay really focused. And I don't say that in a cocky way, but rather, hey, I really have to stay focused on what is important in this campaign. But I would say, really, it was not that I had fears about that. It's that I really knew that we could work together, and it was one of the things I was most proud of. I mean, when I left the Colorado legislature 2.5 years ago to take this appointment within the federal administration, the President of the United States request to serve at the Pentagon, I left missing Colorado, not knowing what I was stepping into a new role, right? But veterans and service members, when they're called to serve, they step up, and it was an opportunity for me to serve. And so as I look back and I think we really should. It's about the impact you can make, so less about the fear of, well, what happens if I do this? I mean, I thought weeks and weeks before that, when I was joining the Marine Corps, like, what happens if I don't like it? What happens if I get dropped out? What happens if I can't pass boot camp? What happens if my family can't come to graduation? It's really about, how am I going to get through this? How am I going to tackle it? And it's one of the spirits I love most about the Marine Corps is it's the grit. It's the absolute grit of just, I'm going to grind through this. I'm going to do it well, and I'm still going to do it with the same level of perfection, dedication, and honor, and courage, and that commitment. And those are all the things that I love.
I love it. Okay. So then you got appointed into a new position. So can you tell me a little bit about that process, like being appointed and the impact that had on you? I think like more emotionally, because again, I just think that your story is unique because it's not that you had these like aspirations of billets or titles. It was the aspiration of making change happen.
Yeah. And like so many of us in life, you never really know where it's going, right? I mean, I started off life thinking I was going to be a paramedic in 2 years. I was enrolled in a community college. I was passing, and then boom, I was off to Iraq. Right? I look at my youngest son. I had a plan to start at the community college, and he was born premature. Like, things happen in life that sometimes change your trajectory. What I love about Marines is that they're adaptable, they're malleable, and that they can adapt to the situation. For me, it was the opportunity to receive federal appointments for any administration, any president of the United States are very important and an absolutely awesome opportunity to serve in a different way. I, of course, wanted to serve at the Pentagon, and more importantly, started off serving at the Secretary of the Navy's office because it's not that I couldn't be happy anywhere else, but I really believed that if there was going to be an opportunity to serve in the administration and that the president and their team was going to ask me to serve, there was going to be in that capacity. And so I was very fortunate to serve over the last 2+ years at the Department of the Navy, where I got a great opportunity to work alongside the Commandant of the Marine Corps, both General Berger and General Smith, and the Secretary of the Navy, Secretary Del Toro, and my immediate boss, the Assistant Secretary Franklin Parker. So it was just all the great things of the Navy and the Marine Corps. And for someone who had been out of the Marine Corps for some time, it was a great way to be back in the family. The different family. I currently am now over at USDA, where I'm at the Rural Business Cooperative Services as a chief of staff, helping assist their various operations. So it's been a phenomenal opportunity and one that I'll never regret. I say that because what was so important for me when I was contemplating joining the Marine Corps was, and partially I'll say this, why I went to college first for one semester is, I was a little torn. I knew I really wanted to join the Marine Corps, but I also knew I really wanted to go to college and I wanted to kind of have this civilian pathway and didn't really know how to do both. And I remember talking with my parents and friends, and knowing I never want to be the person when I'm 60 or 65 and say, man, I didn't join the Marine Corps. I didn't do it. I didn't know if I could become a Marine. I didn't want that regret. And so I joined. And I think the same thing was true in this final appointment. I mean, such an opportunity to serve on behalf of the administration and the American people. There was no way I was going to, and so few of these positions that there was no way I was ever going to say, I'm not gonna take up an opportunity to move from Colorado, which is one of the greatest states, out to the East Coast, me in DC, which I love as well, to not serve on behalf of the administration. So it's been a great blessing.
And were you enlisted your whole time in the Marine Corps?
I was actually always a reservist, although ironically at that time and period, right? I mean, reservists were spending a significant amount of time on active duty. So by the time I did my boot camp, my annual training, or my Marine combat training, things like that. But we were activated for a little bit after 9/11 for just a short period. And then, of course, in 2003. So, no, the bulk of my service was during that period. You, of course, remember, and I was fortunate it didn't really apply to me a whole lot, but the stop loss program in which Marines who had finished their service were still held in to help with boosting those numbers. So, but my primary commitment was in the Marine Corps Reserves.
And I just think it's important to note, because I think that sometimes there's this perception that you have to have been like this extremely high rank to, especially I think in the federal government, there is this perception that you have to be this extremely high rank to serve in certain capacities or to do certain things. And I feel like maybe it's because I'm somebody who got out as a sergeant, and it is doing some things that initially people are like, oh, you could do that at that that rank, and it's what your rank was in the military doesn't always signify all the impact and the things you did. And it also doesn't, like, for the rest of your career, define you forever. Yes, you're always a Marine, but you don't like get stuck in that. And so I think that that's really important to note that, again, this career path and where you've ended up is not because you had like these goals of these things, the goals or of these titles. It was to make this impact, to see these problems and, hey, I think I have solutions or ways that we can figure out that. And I think that's something that Marines really bring to the table. As you were saying, this like a problem solving ability and working with whoever to make it happen.
You've got to work with whoever. I mean, you have to. Great leaders do that, right? You can't change your teams every single time. And I've learned that throughout my tenure in government, in the civilian sector. It's one of the things that I've impressed upon my oldest son now, who just graduated from the Air Force Academy, right? He's going to be an officer. He is an officer right now, going off to graduate school. But the bulk of my service in the Marine Corps was a Lance Corporal. And I was fortunate that my MOS barely allowed me to promote to corporal because, as you know, it's not about your own desires. I would have loved to have been a corporal or a sergeant. It's just that bill wasn't moving up. And so there are a number of phenomenal leaders who are corporal level, who are Lance Corporal level, who are PFCs, who are privates. You can be a leader at any stage. And I think it's really important that people understand that. And that if you feel that you're called to lead, do it. I mean, it's one of the things Marines don't shy away from doing.
And in so many capacities. And so I work at USDA as well. That's actually how we met. And I think it's been, at least for me, it's been really cool because I feel like USDA does an amazing job at, like, at least this has been my experience. Like you said, anybody can lead at any level. I have seen so many different initiatives that the point person is the specialist or the person who really understands this problem or the person who understands these stakeholders. And so can you tell me a little bit about how your experience has been with the Department of Agriculture and what you're doing now and what you're seeing now? Because I think that a lot of people don't realize the amount of things that the USDA does and the way that they make an impact. And at least for me, I've only been here 3 years and I'm still like blown away by like all the things. So what are some of the things that you've seen that you've really like, this is awesome that the USDA does that or that they do that this way?
I mean, the entire organization is massively impressive. I will admit that I didn't know a fraction of what they were accomplishing, all the work that they're doing globally. I think sometimes we just think too that, USDA's focus is just in the US. I mean, they have a global imprint in which they're successfully helping carry out missions every single day. And so for me, it's been phenomenal. For me, it's been great to be part of a team and have a team that is that are the type of spirit of Colorado. Roll up their sleeves and dive in and see how I could be helpful. And that is what tells you about the success and healthiness of an organization. And I've been there almost a little over 6 months now. It doesn't matter which department you're in, where you're at. People are so nice. They're really committed to their work. They're very passionate about their work. So many organizations today struggle, and I say this because my graduate coursework, my undergrad was all in organizational management, health and well-being, and leadership of organizations. They're not successful because they don't have the right people. And even if you have the right people, can you keep them motivated? Can they be led? Are they passionate about the work they're doing? How do you do that? USDA has found the right recipe in a number of those aspects to continue to have people super passionate about the work that they're doing every day. And that's really important. I mean, I think to your point earlier, if we forget about the impact that they can have, it's massive. And so for me, it's just been phenomenal. I really enjoy the division I'm at with the Rural Business Cooperative Services. Administrator Dirksen Long, which again is a great boss to work for. But the whole team is really family oriented and mission oriented, and it reminds me of the similarities we had in the Marine Corps about being driven in that regard.
That has been one of my favorite things. I'm constantly reminded of things in the Marine Corps and how you can push so hard to get the mission, but then take care of your people. That was something, at least for me, I had great leaders in the Marine Corps, which I know is not the case for everybody, but definitely. So I said that the time was going to go fast, and it has gone fast. But before we get to the last question, I want to make sure, is there anything we haven't talked about that you want to talk about, or any advice you have for somebody that is either transitioning out of the Marine Corps or trying to find their place?
Well, let me just start off by thanking you for having venues like this that allow other veterans to be heard and talked to. And I would say for those who are transitioning out, or any veteran who's struggling, reach out to other veterans. And there's such a massive network of veterans, and I know that a lot of times in our culture of the military service, there's a stigma of reaching out and asking, but there's any veterans always willing to, and happy to help another veteran. So don't hesitate to reach out.
Perfect. So with that, and if there's nothing else you want to discuss, I'm going to ask the last question, which is, if you had to take the oath again, would you?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I was honored then and didn't understand how impactful it would be for the rest of my life, how taking that oath would change my life in a different trajectory. But absolutely, it is one of the most things that I'm most proud of. And so I would absolutely do it all over again.
This is the Oath We Took podcast, and you just heard a piece of Leroy's story. You now know one more Marine and one more piece of Marine Corps history. His sacrifices matter. His stories matter. Not every Marine story is the same. We didn't all join the military for the same reason. What is the same is the oath we all took. An oath that easily could have ended in death, and for some, it did. So listeners, instead of asking you to thank a Marine for their service, I am going to challenge you to continue to listen to their stories instead.